All right, let's talk about one of the weirdest, most unbelievable military campaigns in all of history, Australia's Great Emu War of 1932. And yeah, you heard that right. It sounds like a total joke, but this story is absolutely real, and it tells us a ton about desperation, what happens when things go wrong, and just how unpredictable nature can be. Let's dive.
I mean, just think about that question for a second. Can a modern army, with trained soldiers, machine guns, and actual military strategy, lose a war to birds? It seems completely ridiculous. It should be a total blowout, right?
Well, as it turns out, the answer was not what anybody expected. What actually happened was a huge national embarrassment, a complete military failure, and a lesson in humility that people are still talking about today.
Okay, so to understand how you even get to a point where soldiers are fighting birds, we have to go back in time, to right after World War I, because this whole thing didn't just happen out of nowhere. It was born from a perfect storm of economic collapse and a whole lot of broken promises made to the country's heroes.
40%. Just let that number sink in. Almost half of the country's young men went off to fight in the Great War. So when they came back, Australia had this enormous problem. What do you do with hundreds of thousands of veterans, many of them traumatized, in a society that's already stretched to its breaking point?
And if that wasn't bad enough, right on top of all that post-war chaos came the Great Depression. By 1932, nearly a third of the entire country was out of work. The government's big idea for the veterans, giving them land to become farmers, was about to run headfirst into this economic nightmare.
This was just a total recipe for disaster. The government created these soldier settlement schemes, giving veterans huge pieces of land. But a lot of this land was, frankly, terrible for farming. Most of these guys had zero farming experience. Then the Depression hits. The price of wheat just falls through the floor, and all those promised government subsidies, poof, they disappeared. By 1929, almost a third of these new veteran farmers had already given up. The ones who stuck around were hanging on by a thread.
So picture this. You've got thousands of desperate farmers just trying to survive. And then the new enemy arrived. And no, it wasn't an invading army. It was an invading flock of emus.
And look, we are not talking about a few birds pecking at some seeds here. We are talking about 20,000 emus. A huge drought in the Australian interior had pushed them out, and they were migrating toward the coast, following routes they'd used for centuries. But this time, they found something new along the way.
See, the farms weren't just in the emu's path, they had become an emu paradise. The farmers had, completely by accident, created the world's greatest emu buffet, with endless fields of wheat and big, easy-to-drink-from water troughs. They changed the whole ecosystem, and now the ecosystem was responding in a very big, very destructive way.
And the problem just spiraled. The emus weren't just eating the wheat, they were trampling everything, and even worse, they were so big and strong, they just smashed right through the famous rabbit-proof fence. And you know what comes through holes in a rabbit-proof fence? Yep, rabbits. A whole second wave of invaders, making an already terrible situation even worse.
So facing total ruin, these veteran farmers went back to what they knew from the war. They didn't ask for scientists or farming experts, they asked for the one tool they knew could solve big problems.
Yep. They specifically requested Lewis machine guns. These guys had seen firsthand what those things could do on the Western Front, so they figured, hey, a couple of these will make short work of some birds. And the wildest part? The Minister of Defense, Sir George Pierce, actually agreed. He thought it'd be good target practice and a nice little PR moment.
So the Army sends out Major Meredith with a couple of soldiers and 10,000 rounds of ammo. And it was a complete and utter fiasco from the get-go. Their first ambush was a bust because the emus wouldn't bunch up, they scattered like a bunch of guerrilla fighters. Then they found 1,000 emus at a dam. A perfect target, right? Nope, the machine gun jammed after taking out only a dozen of them. Finally, they tried mounting a gun on a truck, but the terrain was so rough they couldn't aim. And the emus, which can run at 50 kilometers an hour, just outran the truck.
This quote from the commanding officer says it all. The Army's initial confidence just evaporated and turned into this grudging, almost fearful respect for these birds. Major Meredith was absolutely blown away by how tough they were.
So that first campaign was a total PR disaster, and the troops were pulled out while everyone in Parliament was basically laughing at them. But the emus just kept coming. So the real question is, why? Why was a modern military getting so completely and utterly outsmarted?
Well, it turns out the emus had some serious tactical advantages. First, their speed. They were just plain faster than the military's trucks on that rough ground. They were also unbelievably tough. Stories spread about emus taking multiple bullet hits and just keeping on running. Tactically, they were brilliant. They'd split into small, unpredictable groups, making the machine guns almost useless. And, craziest of all, they seemed to have leaders. Tall birds that would stand watch, like sentinels, and warn the flock when danger was coming.
You read Major Meredith's reports and it sounds like something from a nightmare. He seriously compared the emus to unstoppable Zulu warriors and said their hides had the invulnerability of tanks. This was definitely not the easy target practice he was promised.
The final numbers just lay out the failure in black and white. The army actually had to try twice. The first attempt was so bad they called it off in less than a week, but the farmers begged, so they went back for round 2, and the results were still terrible. In total, they fired almost 10,000 rounds to kill less than 1,000 emus. That's a ratio of about 10 bullets for every single bird. Just an incredibly inefficient and deeply embarrassing failure.
So after the military finally threw in the towel for good, the emu problem was still there. But this whole disaster taught the government a really valuable lesson, and it led to a solution that was way more effective and a lot less dramatic.
After the Army's very public face plan, the government completely changed tactics. They set up a simple bounty system, paying farmers and hunters for emu skins. And the difference? It's just night and day. In only 6 months, that bounty system led to over 57,000 kills. It completely dwarfed what the military did, and it worked so much better.
It turns out the answer wasn't some big, top-down military operation. It was a local, decentralized approach that put the power in the hands of the people who actually understood the land and the animals. A pretty simple, but really powerful lesson.
The legacy of the Emu War was actually pretty big. For one, the government never again agreed to send the military to fight wildlife. They stuck to bounties and, more importantly, they started investing in much better, stronger fences as a long-term fix. But the whole embarrassing episode also really fed into this feeling in Western Australia that the federal government was useless, which helped fuel a movement for them to secede from the country.
So you see, the Great Emu War is so much more than just a funny story from the history books. It's a classic case of trying to solve a problem with completely the wrong tool, of using brute force when what you really need is a smart strategy and local knowledge. It kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? What problems are we facing today where we might be sending in the machine guns when what we really need is just a better fence?